Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another Hikate Cultivate Great series. It's me again, Reina Izuka here, pro athlete and first female to play university men's tackle football in Canada. And I'm super stoked for you guys to hear this one. Melinda Harrison, former Olympic swimmer and is now devoted to helping athletes transition out of sport. Melinda has so many insights. It's so relatable to hear her speak about, the struggles that athletes go through, sort of also, talking about the mindset, the ego, the story that we've been conditioned to hear since we were kids. This is a super insightful interview. I think this will help tons of athletes and anyone who's been basically doing the same thing for like 10, 20 years and is now at a stage in their life where, they have to transition. So pop on your headphones, sit back, and enjoy this one, guys. You might need to take some notes for this one. Melinda, thank you so much for hopping on today. I'm really excited for this one. How are you?
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and good. I'm good.
It looks really sunny on your end, which is always nice. It's always a plus.
Sunny and cold.
It's cold, eh?
Yeah.
I'm
in Toronto right now.
Oh, you're in Toronto. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. So me too. We're experiencing the same thing. Okay. So I guess first question, can you please explain, I know last time we spoke about, the story that athletes are told since childhood. And would you be able to please explain that story and how that impacts the transition for athletes when they actually come to retiring from their sport and retiring from competing at a high level?
Right. And I think, when I explain this, what I want it to do is to resonate with everyone's personal experience that they've had. So as a high performing athlete, what happens is that we start engaging in certain types of sports. And often we don't actually make a choice to engage in them. We just are put in them by parents or grandparents or neighbors or friends of ours are doing them. And so, the metaphor that I use about how we end up following this storyline is understanding that, like, if you were a skier and you got put on the rope tow at a baby hill and you went up the rope tow and you came down and somebody looked at you, maybe 3 or 4 times it takes you to come down that and master that skill, but you master it faster than anybody else out there. And all of a sudden somebody says, wow, you have potential. That's the first storyline. You have potential. And so that individual might go to your parents or they might go to a coach and say, Johnny has potential. I think we should put him in ski lessons. And so, he had 10 ski lessons and he learns to go up the chairlift. And he's coming down the chairlift and, loving the sport, like just getting such a thrill out of it, and is an amazing jumper over the little bumps. And somebody looks at Johnny and says, wow, Johnny, you have potential. The story gets further and further embedded. Then he wins his first race. And the story again gets deeply embedded, like, I'm good, I have potential. And eventually what happens is that not only do you gain the self-belief that you're good, but your whole environment creates this belief that you're good until you're not.
Right.
Until you hit a hurdle, which you're going to hit. But then when you hit that hurdle, you have all these people around you supporting you, saying, we'll get through this hurdle. We'll get through this obstacle. You can overcome that failure. It's not a big deal. So the story then gets embedded that I have support people to help me get over my hurdles, to help me achieve. And you keep going along your career and, you have greater and greater levels of success. You might be a novice and then you go up to, Pee-wee, and then you go up to junior, and then finally, you're on the age group team, and then, maybe you make the junior national team, and then perhaps you make a national team or an Olympic team. When that is all over, that story is so deeply embedded into who you are as a person not just your identity. And this is where I think people get confused about this identity thing. It's the environment that surrounds you. It's your whole way of being has been the environment, the people, and your sport. The expectations, learning to deal with failure. All of those things are embedded in this story. And then the story ends. No support. No idea what direction to go in. No, you just become this person that goes, wow, what does my life mean right now? Because all that meaning and all the events that created that meaning are no longer. And so in transition, we have to understand the story that we're told and go back and say, what parts of that story do I want to keep? Because there's a lot of really great things about being an athlete.
Right.
A lot. But there are things that aren't great about being an athlete. The injuries, the perhaps the lack of education that you get. I mean, there are aspects of not, that high performance athletes demands that don't help you after sport. And so you have to decide what parts of that story you want to keep and what parts do you want to get rid of. And then the ones that you want to keep in transition, and as you accelerate into the next part of your life, those are the ones you have to act on. So just because you were good in sports and showed commitment, if you don't show commitment in the next thing, you're not going to get good.
Right.
But people expect to get good, or they expect, well, I'm committed. Yeah, you were committed a year ago to something, but what are you committed to today? So in many ways, an athlete in transition needs a little bit of a reality check. They have these great things, but if they live in the past, so too will they. So it's interrupting that story and beginning to understand what parts are valuable to me going forward into my future self, and then letting go of the things that aren't valuable.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Oh, 100% for sure. And I see what you're saying. Yeah. Very clearly. And so I guess well, for example, I'm a young athlete. I'm 22. I just finished university and I'm just starting to transition into my pro career. And it's something that I am starting to see, because I trained with all the older, CFL veterans and stuff like that. And they're actually, now they have families, and now they're transitioning out because they retired. And you see that period, and it looks scary from my perspective too, right? They don't know, a lot of them don't know what to do. And so what do you think, for someone like me who still has, hopefully some ways to go before retiring from sport, what are some things that I should consider, to sort of prepare for that, not exactly transition, but when it's done, so it's not as difficult, or I'm more prepared for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's a way more complicated question than
Right.
what we have time for today.
Right. Sorry about that. I'm just
No,
curious.
it's okay. And it's a great question. I think, some of the things that you can do is get curious. Get curious about what brings you joy outside of sport. Because, and this is really, it's a complicated question, but when everything is about accomplishing something, then in the absence of that accomplishment, we tangle up success and self-worth. So really starting to understand what your worth is outside of your success and what brings you joy outside of your success. And if it's only accomplishments that bring you joy, then you're going to be living a life of reaching an accomplishment and then going through a tough time, reaching an accomplishment, because accomplishments in itself, it's the process to that accomplishment that really matter. The accomplishment actually, and it's, there's so much research that's happening on this. The person who gets home from the Olympics and goes into, a depression or an anxiety, or, really doesn't understand, like all of a sudden they're just not feeling great. And it's because the accomplishment is in the past. And yet, and here goes back to the story we told ourselves is that we need to accomplish in the future. And that's a big hurdle when you just accomplish something really big. An athlete, you and I both know how hard it is to be good at sport, to be really good at sport.
Right.
And so you're sitting there going, oh gosh, I got to go through this all again. And, that includes the aches and pains and the hard workouts, all of those things that contribute to your eventual accomplishments. And so again, in transition, we need to change that story and find other meaning of what's important to us other than just the accomplishments. That's starting to look at what brings, what am I curious about what am I curious about out there? Like what is something that brings me happiness that's not an accomplishment? And write those things down, because eventually, and we do this in my course, it's an extensive 9-week course. So you're asking for something that I can't give you an answer, because there's so much that goes into this. But, in the course, we work on pulling those golden nuggets out, so that when sport ends or when you're working through your transition, you have your golden nuggets. And then once we have the golden nuggets of what are things that I'm really interested in, what makes me flow, what makes me, what do I not want? All of these things can come together into, your own Venn diagram to start to say, this is the direction I want to go in. Sorry, a roundabout answer to your...
No, I think, it's totally true, and it's totally important. And I think with COVID, like for me personally, like it was difficult on my family, but at the same time, it really, because all sports stopped, training stopped. And so I'm like, man, like, what am I going to do? Like, okay, I'll get the workouts that I can do at home without equipment. But I started to embrace things like I love stand-up comedy, or I love music. Like it's just euphoric for me. So I picked up, I invested in a guitar, and now I'm learning how to play guitar, and I'm not where I wouldn't have done that if I didn't have this short period of time. And I wish when I was in high school, I had allowed myself to accept that I liked other things, instead of just being, all in and just zero in and have like a really narrow lens. Although at the same time, like, I do understand where I was coming from at that time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the story you were told, that you had to be all in to get to where you had to go.
Yes.
Probably not true. If we look at our Norwegian athletes, it's, we can take a look at the lens that they approach things from. And, they're the clear winners of winter sport.
Right.
It's a completely different lens that they approach things at. So, but the joy that you're getting from music and playing guitar and creativity, like those are really important clues to help you. And I would challenge you to continue to explore those on as many different levels as you can find, because you don't know whether it's music or it's writing. There's something that's driving you from a creativity, or it's connecting to a higher power. You don't know these things, right? Until you start exploring them. So, that's where we have to get into exploration.
Right, for sure.
And just because you became an expert in one area, it doesn't give you an automatic right to be an expert in another area.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I love that. No, I love that you said that. I love that you said that. Like, yeah, I love that you said that. Like, and to become an expert anyways in your sport, like you have to think back how long it took anyways. And now when you do something else, it's probably going to take a really long time until you get to that point. So
Yeah.
I like that you said that.
And it's also, you have to get rid of the expectations
Mm.
that you're wearing a superhero outfit.
Right.
I'm wearing the superhero outfit. I can do this faster or better than anyone else. You
Right.
know, even though I don't know anything about it, I'm expected to do this faster or better than anyone else.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
that's just, that's a bunch of crap. So,
I, no, like I'm friends with a lot of guys, and I grew up playing like football with men. And sometimes, yeah, I do see what you're saying, because like when you have these ripped bodies, and like you just feel like sometimes you feel like you're just something else.
right,
And you
right.
get lost in that, that
That
appearance and your goal and your accomplishments and stuff like that.
the physical manifestation for sure.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Good.
Okay, well, I'm sure we could talk about this for a really long time, but just for time, the next question is, I'm sure this is a difficult one, but like, what's one or some defining moments in your life? Yeah, like just a defining moment or a vivid moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think, one of my great strengths that I didn't really recognize until, a few years ago, where my husband pointed out to me, is that, like, I'm willing to jump in. I'm willing to try. And if it's not for me, or if I fail, I give myself time periods where I'll just jump in and try. So
Mm-hmm.
when I went to high school in Florida at age 14,
Wow.
I had a week to decide whether to go to high school in Florida or not, leaving London, Ontario.
Uh-huh.
I jumped in. I got my first job in Toronto. I jumped in. And then when I started this research project, interviewing 100 athletes that had successfully transitioned, I jumped in. I didn't know what I was doing, but I trusted that I could figure it out.
Right.
And so all of those points in my life, and I can point to many of them, they've been pivot points to who I am today because I was willing to jump in.
I love that. Yeah, you just go for it, right?
Yeah, and
Explore.
instead of worrying about what the outcome might be,
Right.
for some reason, I have this ability to say, okay, and it's not okay. I'm only going to give it a 2-week period. Like when I went to high school in Florida, my mom and dad were like, are you kidding me? And I mean, I couldn't believe they even reflecting on it, having had 3 kids. I reflect back and think, how the heck did they ever do that? We had 1 week to decide. But it just was mom and dad made me make a commitment. I had to stay for a year. I had to. I had no option. And so I think that jump in with a commitment, knowing what that time frame was. It's the same as the research project. I said, I'm going to interview 100 people. I'm not going to stop until I interview 100 people.
Wow.
Like I didn't even know 100 people that had successfully transitioned, but
Right.
that was the defining period. And so, I think that's a really, that those things are important things for me.
That's beautiful. I love that. Just jump in. Yeah. So at Hecate, we like to use hashtag #CultivateGreat. And I was curious, how do you interpret cultivate great, and how might you apply that in your life?
So I think we have to step back and understand what great is before we can understand how to cultivate great.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I said earlier on, we're told the story about the definition of great, and it usually has something to do with performance. But is that the definition that really resonates with you? Or do you need to create your own definition? So it's important to challenge that word. And then once you have that challenge, once you've done that challenge, then figure out how you're going to go about getting to that state, that final state, cultivating it.
Mm-hmm.
And cultivation really means constant development. constant growth. And so, to me, the way that I've framed it is through the 9 practices. That you're constantly developing, and each letter of the word practices refers to part of how you cultivate great. Proficiency, regulation, attitude, commitment, tuned into other people, not just tuned into yourself, understanding your identity, including your strengths and your shadow strengths, so not just your athletic identity. Commitment, the next, confidence. How do you build confidence, especially in a time when you don't have confidence? Using your emotions and having a secure base. Those things to me help me create great, cultivate great. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's all. Okay. That's awesome. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Melinda. Very insightful. Definitely, this is my favorite interview so far. I really appreciate your time.
Wonderful. I'm glad I could help.